The time is 4:22. You're tuned into PBAFM on 89.7. I'd like to welcome my guest on the line, Kristen Hansen. Kristen is the founder of On Hansen Performance, which specialises in a neuroscience approach to leadership and sales. And this afternoon we'll be discussing emotional intelligence. Welcome to the program.
Thank you very much, Bianca.
Thank you for joining us this afternoon. Now, let's start off with the definition of emotional intelligence. What is emotional intelligence?
Well, emotional intelligence is our ability to perceive, understand, reason and regulate our emotions and or influence other people's emotions as well.
And this is important for people in their daily lives and also obviously in corporations and businesses, which is who you work with.
Yes, I do a mix of both, but I do quite a lot of work with leaders and managers in organisations who, I guess we find that if they can build their emotional intelligence, they have better results from their team members because they're able to understand what's going on for them, they're able to impact them, motivate them, understand when they're disappointed or frustrated, etc., and they just end up being far more effective as leaders once they build emotional intelligence skills. And we all do, with partners, friends, siblings, loved ones, etc.
Now, a few articles I looked up explaining what emotional intelligence is not, and this article says, a lot of people think it's being agreeable, it's being optimistic, happy, calm, motivated, and this article mentioned that emotional intelligence is not all of those things.
It says it's not being calm.
Yes, this article, they say that a lot of psychologists have confused emotional intelligence with these personal qualities of, being agreeable and, optimistic and that sort of thing. And it was a little bit confusing.
Well, it's true. So I think in some ways what happens is, being all good about emotions isn't emotional intelligence. We can be frustrated and we can be a little bit impatient, for example, but recognise that, acknowledge that and shift it and change it. And that's what the emotional intelligence is. So certainly, for example, being agreeable is, great on one hand, but that may also mean that we're not emotionally intelligent enough to understand the impact that us being so agreeable is having on our own emotions and therefore impacting, our relationship with others. So we certainly can't just be all these good traits and that makes us emotionally intelligent. Emotional intelligence is our ability to understand the impact of emotions on ourselves, the impact of emotions that other people are experiencing, and then adjust them and have skills and strategies to shift and change emotions. So I think that's where that key difference is about, what emotions are and how you link it to actual emotions or traits of people.
That makes sense. So what's the research around this? Is it something that sort of starts in childhood? Is it something with the way people are brought up and how good their emotional intelligence is?
Yeah, so that's an interesting one as well. So research shows that emotional intelligence is both a nature and a nurture aspect.
Okay.
So that we have traits where some children, for example, very young children, are already empathetic and others are not so empathetic. But just certainly you can be taught emotional intelligence significantly, how your parents behave, what you're taught at school about how to respect others, etc. All of that can make a very big difference to how somebody develops their emotional intelligence.
And I did come across an article that reported that in a second grade classroom, a child had come to class upset and someone he knew had been shot, and the teacher then proceeded to ask the other students how many of them had known a person who'd been shot in the States, and every hand went up. And he said that also half the children in this class had special needs, and he says, quote, "I expected the atmosphere to be chaotic, but instead the students were quite focused and calm." And it was all about their practices on emotional intelligence with the children at the young age. And apparently he said that they had daily sessions of breathing buddies, they called it, where they lay on the floor with a stuffed animal on their belly, and they were counting their breaths, and apparently this exercise strengthened their brain and improved their emotional intelligence.
Yes, absolutely. So the research is very strong on very simple things that you can do to build emotional intelligence. And breathing certainly does help us regulate our emotions and help us see them in a more positive light. If we're experiencing a negative emotion, we propose a science-based 30-second circuit breaker, for example, that if you're feeling overwhelmed or stressed or worried or concerned or what have you, or angry or frustrated, that you have a 30-second circuit breaker, and that's breathe, label, reappraise. So the act of breathing increases our heart rate variability. It certainly increases our calmness, and it increases our veto effect, the ability for us to not respond or react, immediately to something, but take a moment to think how best to respond to it. So that's the breathe. And then the label is give it a name. And in talking about the experiences of the death or the shooting or whatever, if people are able to verbalise and legitimise also and validate how they're feeling by giving it a name, I'm feeling overwhelmed, I'm feeling disappointed, I'm feeling hurt, I'm feeling upset, I'm feeling worried, that can help. And then reappraising is the ability to put things into perspective, and that's about how to look on the positive side, or what can we learn, or how do we generally be grateful for the things that we can be grateful. So if somebody's running 10 minutes late, or if we're running 10 minutes late just for an appointment, we can get really overwhelmed or frustrated or upset with ourselves, but we can easily say to ourselves, well, at least it's not 20 minutes late, or at least this gives me 5 minutes to think about what I really need to say in this appointment, or get myself into the right frame of mind. So if we can look at the negative and turn it into a positive, or if we can look at an obstacle, whatever that obstacle is, and see that as an opportunity or a challenge for ourselves to be the best that we can be in the moment, actually the brain harnesses quite different responses and actually gives us a greater ability to deal with the challenge.
And if people have a low emotional intelligence, how long would it take for them to work on it, for it to improve? A couple of weeks, a couple of months, for the brain to change and the thinking to change?
I think there's been some research that certainly things like mindfulness practice can be impacting the brain's ability to have a greater veto and be more mindful. Within 3 weeks, I've seen physical changes. But that does take some serious practice. And in terms of overall mindful emotional intelligence, there's so many different aspects to emotional intelligence. So part of it is your ability to be aware of your own emotions. Part of it's ability to be aware of others. Some of it's the ability to reason and understand emotions. Some of it's an ability to regulate and change emotions in yourself and others. So overall, when we work with organisations, we work with people over a 6-month period where they self-rate themselves on emotional intelligence, but they also have others rate them. So it's a 360 on emotional intelligence. And we've seen in 6 months that people who put focus on it and make an effort to change it, within 6 months we've been able to see a 30% shift in other rated perceptions, not only their own, but other rated perceptions of that person's emotional intelligence. And that wasn't for every person in the room, but that was certainly for the people who put the effort in to change it. Because like anything, we can say, I'd like to improve my emotional intelligence. I'm going to work on it for 6 months and do nothing, and then we haven't really worked on it. We haven't made an improvement. But for those that actually actively, made some big changes in terms of how they saw things and practiced a bit of mindfulness and did the breathing exercise, etc., did some actual activities, there were some significant changes. And I think that's, hope for us all. And I've certainly worked with many, many people in this space over a period of about 6 months where they've seen significant changes. But yes, I believe with just some skills and strategies, we can immediately impact our own emotional intelligence. Just that breathe, label, reappraise, the 30-second circuit breaker. I've had many, many managers say that that's made a huge difference. Just having a strategy to deal with stress or upset or overwhelm when they haven't had one previously has, made them feel a lot more positive under, circumstances that are quite challenging.
That's good to know. And as we all know, we can change our brain if we want to. But like you said, it's the intention. If we want to do it, we can do it.
That's right. And with neuroplasticity, the ability for the brain to change, it takes attention and positive feedback. So certainly, again, we can't just say, I want to change my brain, I want to be more emotional intelligent. What attention are we putting to emotional intelligence? That might be reading. If you read a book on, like Daniel Goleman, or some articles, or look at some podcasts. If you set yourself an intention each day to be more emotionally intelligent, or use a strategy like breathe, label, reappraise, You need to do a number of things, and then you need to be positively giving yourself feedback for that development in order for the brain to go, oh, yes, I'm on the right track, better do more of this.
Yeah.
And that's how neuroplasticity occurs, that people change their brain over a period of time because they're able to put that attention and positive feedback to it.
Yeah, I've heard some people say that too, in their personal relationships or in the workplace, if there's a challenging situation or someone's, made them unhappy, they said they count to 10 or 20. So, yeah, it's that, training ourselves, isn't it? Like, it seems simple, but it's still work. We have to train ourselves to behave differently.
That's right, absolutely right. Train ourselves and give ourselves positive feedback along the way, not just wait till we're perfectly emotionally intelligent, because if we don't congratulate ourselves for the small changes, we're unlikely to see the big changes. So that's a really important lesson in neuroplasticity. We've got to recognise and keep paying attention, not beating ourselves up for if we haven't managed to make, a massive change in one go.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that. That's so important, because I think society and perfectionism and anxiety and people always sort of putting themselves down and I'll only be happy until everything is in place. So that's a good point you raise.
That's right. So we say mind the gap for a neuroplasticity. We say have a goal, and that might be build emotional intelligence, or it might be one aspect of emotional intelligence. It might be able to regulate my emotions and not, lose my cool or pick up other people's emotions more effectively. Just one goal, and then how will you pay attention to that, and how will you put positive feedback to yourself over time on that, and just put that as a primary thing that you focus on each day. That can make a big difference.
Do people write in a diary daily to help them?
Yes, so diaries, gratitude diaries, intentional diaries, all those sorts of things can work. So can sharing it with a buddy or a coach or something like that. That can make a big difference as well.
Mm. And just before we finish off, what's the research currently taking place with regards to EI?
What, sorry?
The research. What research is taking place? Is there a lot of research?
Oh, goodness me. There's lots of research at the moment in all of these areas. I'm not across all of it. I certainly follow, for example, Daniel Goleman is doing research continuously, I guess also on the neuroscience of emotional intelligence, which I find interesting. And he's looking to understand emotional intelligence, of course, from this neuroscience angle. So not everybody is doing that. Some people are studying emotional intelligence from a behavioural or psychology perspective more. But the area that I guess of research that I follow is more that neuroscience of emotional intelligence aspect, which is what happens in the brain when we... So, for example, the mindfulness research, that's one big area. That would be important, but some of the research on regulating emotions and being able to do things like breathing. Yeah. Dr. Evian Gordon has done significant research in this space. He has the world's largest brain database and has been able to identify a lot around, I guess, emotional intelligence aspects by studying the brain. But, yeah, so there's so much, I guess, I wouldn't be across all the research, but I certainly pick out some people that I find fascinating in this space and who are doing it from a neuroscience perspective.
So is it the front of the brain or the back of the brain that changes with EI as it improves? Which part of the brain? Prefrontal or...?
Yeah, so, well, again, the brain is a very complex part of our bodies, and there's a lot of different parts involved in emotional intelligence. The prefrontal cortex certainly plays a major role because the prefrontal cortex is the part that regulates our emotions. It's also the part that we understand. We may intuitively pick something up, but if we can cognitively understand why someone might be feeling upset or frustrated or nervous, then we're using our prefrontal cortex. When we practice mindfulness, we are increasing parts of the prefrontal cortex that regulate emotions. So prefrontal cortex plays a big role, and it helps us regulate the amygdala. So the amygdala is the part of the brain that sets off that fight, flight, freeze response. In some ways, the amygdala is certainly responsible for our survival, but also makes us shout at people or be sarcastic or freeze when we're nervous and can't speak on stage or what have you. So the part of the brain, amygdala, that does that what we're doing in emotional intelligence, or just one aspect of it, for example, is training our brain to be able to regulate that fear factor or frustration factor and come up with a new response. And so the stronger that we train the prefrontal cortex in regulating the emotions, that's certainly one part of building emotional intelligence. Yeah.
So interesting. And I wonder if things like do crosswords and games, like people have these apps on their phones and, you see people playing Sudoku and, brain training. And, if I'm ever stressed, my husband says, just get on your phone and play a crosswords or something because it will distract your brain. It's good for the brain to sort of relax.
Yeah, so, look, brain training games do a whole range of things. Some improve your memory, some improve your ability to focus and not be distracted. And some of these aspects we would call more, I guess, the cognitive or the thinking aspects. And Sudoku and what have you, they're more cognitive. In terms of training your brain for emotional intelligence, certainly there's some brain training out there, some outfits that are useful, that help us, for example, detect positive emotions. So you see some training, for example, that and My Brain Solutions is one that certainly I've looked at myself and utilised, and that helps you, for example, pick up negative emotions that fly across the screen, or positive emotions, what have you, and builds your ability to be aware of different emotions and facial expressions and things like that. So when it comes to brain training online, you need to be aware of what are you actually trying to train the brain to do. Be quicker, be focused, be more emotionally intelligent. One of the games, for example, is just, a positivity game, which is, thinking about the negative thoughts you have and thinking, how can I reappraise them positively? And that game in itself is a very, very strong habit to get into. When something goes wrong, how quickly can you turn that into it's okay? It might not be great, but it's not terrible. And that's, I think what great leaders do when they're under pressure or frustration or what have you, or partners, they are able to, not see it as negative or as terrible in that moment as, their initial reaction might be.
Interesting. So interesting. How can people contact you?
So just give me a call or send me an email. So my email is Kristen, Kristen, at Enhansen Performance, ENHANSEN Performance, or go to our website and register your interest, or give me a call, 0414 504 797. That's we're Sydney based. If you are interested in knowing more about programs that we run around the neuroscience of emotional intelligence, or if you have a workplace that you think could be, I guess, benefit from understanding a little bit more about emotional intelligence for the individuals or the leaders.
And you do group sessions and one-on-ones?
Yes, that's right.
Awesome.
So I do what we call executive coaching and or / life coaching, like how to help people improve their abilities in the emotional intelligence space. And I have other people as well in our team who help us with the life coaching. So we do executive coaching, life coaching, and then we do quite a lot of facilitated group sessions. And we run programs, as I mentioned, over a period of time that help improve people's ability to get the best out of their brain, really. And an aspect of that is emotional intelligence.
Yeah, the group sessions would be good, and the one-on-ones, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what people find in having discussion is, oh, God, I'm not the only one.
Yeah.
I thought I was the only one who did X, Y, and Z. And once you feel a little bit more normal and then you hear some more strategies around how to deal with it, I think that's quite empowering. And when the group as a whole improves their emotional intelligence, you see some pretty good things happening in the workplace, or in the home life, or what have you, wherever you are.
I was so glad when I came across your works. I thought, this is what we need. We need more of this. I think we've sort of neglected this over the decades, but it's so good to see that you're doing this.
Yeah, I think it has become a pretty prevalent part of growing up even now. And what I mean by that is schools are getting much more into mindfulness practice, resilience training, because that's another very strong aspect of emotional intelligence that we train, particularly as workplaces are changing so rapidly and there's more and more ambiguity and more expected to be done with less and more competition and always on technology, etc., we need to be resilient and have bounce back, and a lot of that is a big aspect of emotional intelligence. So we're working with people to be able to, I guess, cope with what business and everyday life is like these days with technology and expectations and, you know, everything that we need to contend with. And it's all just got so much faster and so much harder, I think, for people in the last 10, 15 years, again, because of technological advances and always on. This concept where our brain's not getting a whole lot of rest and everyone expects everything from us within 5 minutes.
And I like your delivery also. I've seen a couple of your talks, and you've got a great way of speaking. You're really personable and you explain things well, and you throw a bit of humour in, and it looked like the audience were really enjoying it. So well done, you're doing a great job.
Yeah, well, you know, you don't want to talk in a boring way about neuroscience, but yes, I love doing some speaking at conferences or what have you on neuroscience of peak personal performance or what have you, and there's certainly some funny stories that I share about myself and about others that I'm aware of in terms of their journey of making their brains better. And I think we can, you know, take these things too seriously, but if we can have a bit of fun along the way and understand that we're human and that our brain is designed to be a bit quirky, and we're not meant to be perfect, you know, but we certainly can make some differences to ourselves and to the lives of others if we understand how the brain works a little bit more. So I think that can be a big difference.
Fantastic. Kristen, thank you so much for joining us.
You're welcome. Thank you very much for having me on your program.
You're welcome. Have a great afternoon.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.